Hello, welcome to Poets in Pajamas, episode 32. I'm Katie Manning, coming to you live from San Diego. And if all goes well, people will start tuning in any moment and will be able to hear me and ask me questions. So I am going to wait and see if I can confirm that some people are able to access this. And so this is the part of the show where I will awkwardly begin by telling you that I am indeed wearing my pajamas. So thanks, Mom and Dad, for the gift from Christmas. I'm also wearing my lovely slippers that are the style that my granny always wore. So I'm carrying on the tradition. Hello, Todd. Welcome. So I can see that people are starting to join. So this is good. I'll go ahead and wait another minute while people tune in, and then I'll jump into some poetry. So before I jump into my own poems, I'll just say thank you so much to Sam Sachs for organizing this, and thank you to Sundress Publications for hosting Poets in Pajamas. I've been able to watch several episodes and participate in asking questions before, so I'm really thrilled to get to be here. So I am going to start out by saying that it's my birthday, and so I decided in honor of my birthday and my first live online reading, I would go ahead and read a couple of poems from each of my poetry collections. So I have 4 chapbooks and 1 full-length collection, and I'm just going to read some of my favorites. So the first one I'm going to go ahead and start with is The Gospel of the Bleeding Woman. Like this, looks lovely. It's from the Point Loma Press series of Wipf Stock publishers. And this book came about because I was sort of obsessed with the Bleeding Woman. She appears in 3 of the gospel accounts, and I really love her because how can you not? It's not her story. She doesn't have a name, and she reaches out and grabs Jesus and is healed. So always one of my favorite characters. So basically I did a lot of research about her. And then I put all of that aside and kind of did my own thing and created a life for her and gave her a name and all that stuff. So my 2 favorite poems from this collection, one is the title poem, and I'll go ahead and start with that. The Gospel of the Bleeding Woman. I touched his cloak. This much is certain. Suddenly I had no name. Suddenly I inhabited a body split in 3. I had been blood's subject for 12 years. I had seen doctors. One time, doctors didn't exist. One time, my voice didn't exist. Other times, I heard voices in my head. Then I touched his white cloak. I explained myself. He knew without asking. Always he called me daughter, 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 and said, your faith has healed you. Then he said, go in peace. Then he said, go in peace and be freed from your suffering. Then he said nothing and walked off to find a dead girl. I touched his cloak. Suddenly I was alone. Suddenly I didn't exist. I walked home in a trance and fell asleep with my sandals on. I didn't wake up in time to see how our stories would end. So this collection gets a little bit weird because the Bleeding Woman ends up jumping out of her time and place into 21st century New York City. So later in the collection, she ends up meeting Jesus at a cafe in New York. So when I wrote this poem, I was reading Brian Henry's Quarantine, which is really a weird and wonderful poetry collection. And so this poem is after Brian Henry, and it echoes some of his language in its title and text. Where death is not and is. I met Jesus the next day at the Life Cafe. Call me Jay now, he said. People lock me up when I say I am God. He pulled back his sleeves to show the marks on his arms from recent shots. I asked what I should do. Just lie low, he said, between bites of falafel. Dead is the way the world wants us. People hate to feel alive. We ate in silence for a while. Then I asked, what happens to us? He wiped his young hands and stood to leave. We are finished, and kissed my cheek. I put my hand on his arm and told him the scars would be beautiful when they healed. So again, that's my first collection, The Gospel of the Bleeding Woman. It was published in 2013. And so for those of you who just tuned in, I know several people jumped in after I began. I'm reading a couple of poems, a couple of my favorite poems from each of my published collections. So the next collection was also published in 2013. It's called Tea with Ezra, and it's from Boneset Books. And it is a limited edition chapbook, so it's not available anymore, but it has poems that respond to familiar texts. So some stories, some songs, other poems, all sorts of things. And the one that felt most appropriate to read to you on my birthday is called Tea with Ezra. And it responds to Ezra Pound's poem, The Tea Shop, in which basically the speaker is checking out this young woman in a tea shop and thinking about how she's going to become middle-aged. And so that poem irritates me. It's one of my least favorite poems, but Ezra Pound is also one of my least favorite poets. So there you go. So this poem responds to that poem, and it's called Tea with Ezra. He told me that only he and Whitman had gained immortality, and he took a bite of his lemon pound cake. I reminded him he'd already been dead 30 years. I tried not to stare through his decaying jaw at the jostled pastry. He looked me up and down and said, "Yes, you also will turn middle-aged." I simply shut his book and drank his tea when I'd finished mine. And then the other poem I'll read you from this collection is one that I have found myself sharing a lot lately with family and friends who I've talked to about dealing with depression and anxiety. So this one is called Why Are You Depressed? He asks. There's never just one answer. Everything pushes down at once, like my body leaves a canyon in the bed, deeper each night. I will never know Chinese, just the charred bones of dismembered language, unremembered. My face will never cause whole nations to fall in love or in war. My words turn no men to swine. Sometimes I'm content. Sometimes I wish some god would turn my flesh to tree, bark thighs firm, birdsong in my hair. So again, that's Tea with Ezra from Boneset Books, limited edition, so it's gone. But those poems appear in some of the other collections as well. So the next poetry collection is also a chapbook, and it was also published in 2013. And this one was published by Yellow Flag Press. And it has poems that are all based on dreams that I had immediately before, during, and just after my first pregnancy. So I figured if I was going to have some crazy anxiety dreams, I might as well use them as poetry fodder. So Rebecca Fleetstra, I see your thanks for sharing your special day with us comment. So thank you for being here. I'm going to read you a couple of poems from this collection. The first one is The Outside In. I awake in my womb. I'm cradling you so gently so as not to break your see-through skin. You are half head, half body. Your eyes are sealed shut, but through the cloudy dark, your heart blinks visibly. I wonder if it loves me yet. I hold you close to my face with both hands, though you're smaller than one, and watch. We breathe fluid together. I press my ear to your chest. Your heart gallops away. And then the second poem I'll read you from this collection is called The Minor Mutation. You know babies change in the womb, from tadpole to gerbil to tiny human. Somehow, yours kept changing. Look at the screen. See the lengthened legs, lengthened neck, hardening hooves. Sometimes these things happen. The good news is that your baby is healthy. It won't come out for an extra year and 3 months, so you can enjoy pregnancy even more. The bad news is that your newborn will be at least 5 feet tall. When you go into labor, you will need to stand on a high place and let your baby ease its long way out, fall hard to the floor, leave your body completely empty. So again, that was I Awake in My Womb from Yellow Flag Press that came out in 2013. And the next collection that I had published is called A Door with a Voice, and it's entirely a digital chapbook. And so you can find it at Agape Editions website. It's an edition of Sundress Publications that puts on Poets in Pajamas. Little plug for Sundress there. So this is the cover, and it is done by one of my colleagues at Point Loma Nazarene University, Dave Adey, who does amazing, amazing artwork. So I was thrilled to have his work on the cover. And this is part of a larger project where I've been using the last chapter of each book of the Bible as a word bank to create poems. And I started this project because I was really angry about people taking language from the Bible out of context and using it as a weapon against other people. And so I decided I would take that language out of context and use it to create poems and see what happened. And it's a really interesting project because it started as this really angry thing. And then as I went on, I kind of slowly realized that what I was doing in picking out that language actually resembled the practice of Lectio Divina, which you can look up later if you're curious about. And some of these poems ended up being really playful, and some of them feel really reverent, and so it's this really interesting kind of mix of tones. So I'm going to read you a couple of poems from this, and the poems that I pulled for this chapbook collection, A Door with a Voice, are all the ones that have some kind of imagery or language that deals with mothers and children. And I think, you know, it's a little bit like a Rorschach test. If I'm looking at the language and I've got young children and I'm dealing with becoming a mother, those are the kinds of things that I'm going to gravitate toward. So the first poem I'll share with you is The Song of Sons, and this is based on Song of Songs. If I found you, I would drink the nectar of head and arm. Wake, mother, place me over your heart. Your arm is strong as death, unyielding as love. A breast is a door with a voice. Let me hear. And the second from this collection is The Book of Lamenate, and this is all that remains of Lamentations. We mothers are weary no more. We get our skin hot as an oven, violate princes with our music. Dancing has fallen to us because of our hearts, these things our eyes always forget. And then with my last few minutes here, I'm going to share with you some pieces from my full-length collection, but I'm distracted by the comments that I see over here. Thank you, Samantha, and thank you very much, Sally, for your encouragement as I go here. So I will go ahead and say, if you are interested in writing in with questions, I hear there's a delay between when the comments are sent and when I can see them. So after I share a few poems from Tasty Other, I'm going to take questions or requests or whatever you'd like. So if you want to go ahead and write in with those now, I'll be able to see them and refer to them in a few minutes. So my last collection I'm going to share with you is Tasty Other. This is the full-length collection. It won the Main Street Rag Poetry Book Award in 2016, so that was super exciting. And it deals with the wonder and terror of becoming a mother. So a lot of the poems that were in I Awake in My Womb, those anxiety dream poems, are in here. This also has poems that respond to fairy tales and biblical mothers, some things that are autobiographical and historical, and it's just a big mix of poems that are dealing with that transition from being a woman to suddenly being a mother, and all of the joy that comes with that, but all of the baggage and expectation and stories that surround motherhood as well. So I'm going to go ahead and read to you the first poem in the collection, which is called Week by Week. A couple of fun things to know about this. One is that it follows the Fibonacci sequence and its line-by-line syllable count. So if you are math-minded, there you go. If you hate math, just pretend I didn't say that. And the other fun thing that's good to know about this is that it responds to those pregnancy calendars that are like, this week your baby is the size of a lemon, and this week it's the size of a cantaloupe, and all those kind of things. So this is week by week. At this time, your offspring is invisible. Now a speck, the dream of seed and root. Baby is a dime, quarter, increasing in value, golf ball, gerbil, your own palm. Then more sports equipment, softball, football, racquetball court. By this point, your baby is a train, a field, a city, an ocean. This week, baby is the sky, now a hemisphere, now a blurry world. And I often stick with reading the poems that respond to fairy tales or the poems that deal with those really weird anxiety dreams. But I thought for today I'd read a couple that are more autobiographical. And the next one I'm going to share with you is called What I Remember. And it's actually a poem that I wrote based on an experience I had when I was young of visiting my Aunt Pam after she gave birth to my cousin. And also a fun fact, I was born on my Aunt Pam's birthday. So happy birthday, Aunt Pam. I'm going to read this poem about you a little bit. So, What I Remember. I am in a white room with white lights. Before me is a bed with white sheets. My aunt has just given birth to my cousin. I don't see the rest of the hospital or the rest of the day. I can't even see the baby. I am just standing in front of the bed, staring at the needle that sticks out of my aunt's arm. I never knew in all my 5 years you had to have a needle in your arm to have a baby. I can never be a mother. If only the needle were the worst part. I thought so. I thought so when I was 5. So the last poem I'm going to share with you from this collection before I take some questions is called God in the Shower, and it's the last poem in the collection. God in the Shower. I slide soap over stretch marks on my stomach and hips. I've grown to love the white strikes the way I love to watch lightning lash the sky. I think of my son. I have a son, my son. The water pounds out an old story I've heard preachers use. A man, it's always a man, adores his son. His son thinks he's a hero. The man is a conductor. He controls a bridge so ships and trains can pass. The boy begs to go to work with his father, so he goes. The man tells the boy to stay put. The boy runs off and gets a limb caught in some gears just in time for a train. You see where this story is going. The man has to decide, save his son or save hundreds, maybe thousands of lives. He lowers the bridge for the train. Sometimes the man hears his son shouting, "Daddy." Sometimes he hears the crunch of bone between gears. Sometimes he sees a man reading a newspaper, a woman wearing a gaudy reindeer sweater. The man cries out, "Don't you know what I've done for you?" The people rush away. This man is supposed to be a metaphor for God. I lean against the shower wall, sick now. I picture Julian of Norwich writing in a dark cell, "Jesus is our mother." In this story, can God be? Could a mother crush her son to save any number of people? Not this mother, not my son. Our story is much more simple. Train brakes scream, whistle pitch falls, metal breaks water. My son, safe in my arms every time. All right, well, thank you all for being here. I'm going to go ahead and look and see if there are some questions. Thank you, Mom, who thinks I don't look like my age. I love you too. I thanked you at the beginning for the nightgown that I got on Christmas Eve. So thank you, Marjorie. Thank you, Sally. I see your comments. So thank you, Bettina. If anyone has any questions, you can go ahead and write in. Happy Eruption Day to you too, Todd. Natal Eruption Day. That's a wonderfully strange way to put that. I appreciate that. Excellent. All right, well, I don't see any questions exactly in the queue here. So instead of awkwardly staring at my comments, I'm going to read you a new poem that I've been working on. I've been working on a brand new project that sort of is, I don't know exactly where it's going yet, but it's dealing with some of the really hard events that have happened in the last couple of years. My parents-in-law, we lost them in a car accident a couple summers ago. And then last spring, my husband found a lump and we ended up going through surgery and chemo. And so these really hard kind of life events, I've been working through them in poems and coming at them sort of from the dual lenses of faith and science. I found myself, especially in the ICU with my father-in-law and then going through cancer with my spouse, drawn to the science of it. And if I could get into the details, those scientific details, it felt like it was easier to handle, or it gave my mind something to do other than just grieve or worry. So this is one poem that I am going to read that is for my spouse, because he's wonderful and he took my children out so that I could be here and read poems to you without little kids running in. I considered keeping the kids here so I could look like that BBC dad whose kids came in and interrupted him, but we'll do that next time maybe. So this poem from my new project in progress is called "The Mirror is Still Covered with Fog." I used to feel furious with the girls who left their hair on the wall of the dorm shower like exposed veins or spider's webs waiting to cling to my wet skin. Now your hair has turned the shower wall into a barbershop floor, the locks flowing off like water in your hands when the promised baldness arrives. This is the smallest of the year's regrets, yet I can't help but stare at the hair-covered wall the way I stared when we saw that pickup fishtail and flip on the freeway. You shave the last strands that hang on like silence. Your bald scalp shines like a new world. To rub my hand over your smooth skin is now the most intimate act. So let me come over here and check and see if anyone has any questions. I don't see any yet. This still could be because of the delay, or it could be because you just don't have any questions. I'm not sure. But feel free, if you'd like to ask a question or make a request of any kind, I am here for the next approximately 8 minutes. So feel free to write in. Thank you, Montag. Thanks for being here. All right, so again, I don't like the dead time, so I'm just going to keep reading poems, and then if a poem pops up, I will answer it. Oh, good. I see a question. So Jessica asked, what's my revision process like? That's a fantastic question. I have a really hard time answering that, but I actually recently came up with a list of questions that I ask myself when I revise. So I would say that I do a lot of revision. And the questions that I ask myself are usually, did I overwrite? Because I know that I have a tendency to do that. So I often need to trim things off of the end. I will also ask myself, did I start with a lot of stuff that I didn't need? And I'll trim stuff off of the beginning. But otherwise, it's a little bit mysterious. I always try to make sure the poem has its own internal logic. And so sometimes I'm revising to make sure that the poem is being consistent with itself. When I work on a collection, then sometimes I'll revise the collection altogether and make sure the poems are, being consistent with each other, or that there's some kind of internal logic to the collection. But otherwise, I found myself revising a piece the other day that I had written in, I think it was in 2013, and I hadn't looked at it, I hadn't revised it since then, but I was looking at it to send out with a packet of poems for a submission for publication, and I ended up revising it quite a bit. So it's a bit mysterious, but that's the best answer I've got, I think. Let me see. Oh, it looks like several more questions popped up here. Let's see what else we have. Les asked if we could hear another one of those new poems. I think I'll save that one for the end. I'll see if I can answer a few more questions, and then I'll end on a poem. Montag asked, how do I know when I'm done working on a poem? I'm going to say I don't. Sometimes I think I'm done, and then 5 years later I find out, oh, I could actually improve this and make it better. I think sometimes I just stop and let it sit for a while, and then see, when I come back to it, if I feel like it needs some more work, or if it's doing what I wanted it to do. Marjorie asked, could you talk about what it was like to have several books and chapbooks come out in the same year? That was fantastic, but it was also overwhelming. So in 2013, I had 3 chapbooks come out for publication, and The Gospel of the Bleeding Woman, I had finished pretty much in 2009. So I had been sending that one out for a few years before it finally got published. I think it was 22 times that I sent it out. And it was a little bit strange. I think probably a lot of my poetry is a little bit strange because the Christian presses that I sent it to were kind of going, oh, this is good, but it's not a good fit for us. The feminist presses I was sending it to were like, it's good, but it's not a good fit for us. So I was kind of too feminist for a lot of the Christian presses and too Christian for a lot of the feminist presses. And so I was really thrilled when Point Loma Press decided to take a chance on it. And Wipf Stock has been really great to work with. So the other two chapbooks that came out in 2013 were actually solicited, which was shocking and wonderful. One was by my friend Emily Capitini, who started Boneset Books, and she asked if I had any poems that would be good for her to kind of start off her press. And so she made a really lovely little limited edition chapbook with Tea with Ezra. And then with I Awaken My Womb, with Yellow Flag Press, J. Bruce Fuller had seen me read some of my poems and some of those weird anxiety dream poems, and he really loved them, and he asked if I had a chapbook of them to send. So as you can imagine, it was hard to kind of give attention to promoting books, but at that point I had no idea what I was doing anyway with regard to promotion. So I just enjoyed it. It was a really wonderful flood of affirmation after several years of trying to get a collection published. So thanks for asking, Marjorie. Let's see. Sally asked, does writing about relatively fresh and difficult experience require new approaches? And do you need new methods to handle such tough subjects about recent experiences? That's also a really good question. I think I don't really push myself to write about things that are new and raw. I write a lot in journals before I start crafting on the computer. Ooh, I dried myself out. So yeah, I don't know that I have necessarily a different approach. I think with newer stuff and with older fodder, I usually end up just kind of making notes in journals and then seeing what I can pull out and what I'm interested in working with. A really wise mentor once said to me to follow my obsessions, that I don't need to fight against the things that are occupying me. And so as I'm dealing with, kind of the grief and trauma of the last couple of years, I figure I might as well start working through that in my writing as well. So thanks for the question. Let's see. Jo Angela Edwins asked, how do you deal with the emotions of writing about loved ones? Things like fear of being seen as exploitative or fear of poetic license or being resented by loved ones. That's a really good question. I think when I'm writing about my loved ones, I'm writing from a place of wanting to honor them. And so I don't worry so much that I'm exploiting our stories or their stories. Because of that, I think it's something that I'm still asking myself often. I run things by my spouse a lot before I share them with anybody. I recently had some poems published about my granny that I know were upsetting to some of my family members, and that was really hard and upsetting to me as well. And I think also a bit surprising because I was coming from a place of wanting to honor her and wanting to capture how beautiful our relationship had been and how open we had been with each other. At the same time, I understand why some of my family members were upset about it. And so it's tricky. I don't have a good answer for how to navigate that, but I think it's important. It's an important question to ask, and I'm going to keep asking it of myself. So thank you for the question. Mary Peelan asked if I always wanted to be a poet. I started creating poems when I was 4, and my granny helped me write the first one down. I'll go ahead and tell you what it was because it makes me laugh. So this poem. It's called The Never-Ending Story by Katie Henson, age 4. The never-ending story really never ends. For someone who I really love really is my friend. So that is my first poem that I remember at least creating that my granny wrote down. And I did always write poems from the time I could write. I have folders full of poems that I wrote all through elementary school, junior high, high school. It really wasn't until college that I started thinking of myself as a poet. it was kind of always something that I did on the side, but I didn't really think of it as a primary identity until I really started working at it more in college, and I started writing daily and took a poetry class, and that shifted my perspective on my own identity and my own relationship with poetry. So thank you for asking that question. Thank you for the happy birthday wishes, and thank you. Thank you for all your comments. All right, well, it looks like I'm about at time, so I'm going to read you one more poem. This poem is also from the collection in progress, the brand new stuff, and it's a bit more ridiculous, even though I think of it as in the same vein, but coming at these kind of, working with faith and also science. So this poem is after a picket sign. When I was young, there was a man who used to picket my church every Sunday, and he had this giant sign that said, "Jesus was not a monkey." And I didn't attend a church that taught that Jesus was a monkey or that really talked about evolution much at all, so I'm not sure why he was picketing us, but it was very striking to me. So this poem is called "Jesus Was Not a Monkey." Jesus did not throw feces at passersby who gawked at him. Jesus did not have a tail, did not eat bugs. His cousin ate locusts, but his cousin was also not a monkey. Jesus was not an old world monkey like a baboon or a mandrill, or a new world monkey like a capuchin or a marmoset. Jesus was also not an ape, which is not a monkey. Jesus' monk-like group of men were not called a tribe, troop, or mission. Jesus did have opposable thumbs and did use tools, but Christ, he was not a monkey. Jesus is not the 9th of 12 creatures on the Chinese zodiac. Jesus was not even a monkey, did not play guitar or make girls scream, did not get bleeped for saying hell. Do not confuse these things. So a little bit of ridiculousness to end on. Thank you so much to all of you for being here. Thank you, Sam Sachs, for setting this up, and thank you to Sundress Publications for hosting Poets in Pajamas. This has been so fun to get to do this on my birthday, so thank you very much. I hope you all have a wonderful night.